All right, so good evening, everyone. My name is Paul. I'm an alcoholic. And this is the fourth step workshop. It's open to anyone who'd like to learn how to do an inventory. Prescribed by Bill W. in the Big Book. It's really not so much about the inventory, but it's more about the dynamic of self and how it defeats us, and to see the solution of surrender. So tonight is on fear. And I'd like to read what it says in the book on it. It says, notice the word that goes, this short word somehow touches about every aspect of our lives. It was an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence was shot through with it. It set in motion trains of circumstances which brought us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve, but did not we ourselves set the ball rolling? I love this part of the book. This thing about it was an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence was shot through with it. Now, some of you have heard this before, but I'm going to repeat it. To me, that evil and corroding thread is that fear, and the fabric of my existence would be represented by my sweater, which would be black, let's say. It is black. And and then that thread of fear would be black. So it would be very hard for you to discern the fear from the fabric of your existence. And I think that's what he's trying to say there. It's almost like the idea of the fish in the water. The fish sees everything else but the water when it's in it, you know? Because that's its medium in a way. And I think for most of us, as egoic-centered people, fear is like a daily staple we sort of live with and try to deal with and try to manage. And sometimes it's overwhelming, sometimes it's just an edge, but it tends to be there all the time. And that always flipped me out. When I came in AA, I had my first real experience of the amount of fear I'd been living in, because when I came in, it was like, since I was a baby, someone had put a hand on my shoulder. And when I came in AA with the group and everything in the first few weeks, that hand was sort of lifted for a little bit. And in its absence, or with it being lifted, I realized its presence, you know what I mean? It had been there for so long, I didn't know that it was there. But when it was lifted a little bit, I realized how heavily I was in fear all the time. It was like the fish finally saw the water, and it was a shock to him. And this motivated me a lot to start looking into what they were telling me in the program. It took me about 1.5 years to really get it, that self had defeated me, or my sense of my identification with my ego and all of its beliefs and its thought systems, you know, and that stream of thoughts that are constantly going on in my head. That's how I get to know what life is for me. That's my interpreter, that's my newspaper, that's my headline maker, that's my opinionated editorial page. It's everything, and everything comes to me through thought. That's how it tells me where I am, that's how it fixes my position, that's how it fixes your position for me. I think about you. I put you, my mind grasps you and turns it into a thought or a concept, and then I now know where you are in relation to where I think I am. And I found that that amount of thinking and reliance on it separated me from life. It actually made up a life out of what already is there. It interpreted my participation in a game where I was getting hit and throwing the pass and getting tackled, and it was like me listening to Howard Cosell commenting on the game. I had a separation from it. I was constantly separated from what was happening for me and in me and through me. And that was very, very unsatisfying. I felt so empty that I didn't feel like there was anything other to do than to try to fill it up, to tell you the truth. And when I filled it up by what my mind or my thoughts told me I should do, it was almost like eating junk food. There was a lot of activity. It kept me busy, but I didn't get much nutrition. And I'd have to keep going back to the store and getting more, be it sex or drugs or drama or excitement. I had to keep going and getting more and more and more. And the more and more I tried to fill this hole, the emptier I started to feel, you know? Now I couldn't figure that one out. And then when I came in AA, they told me that self is what has defeated you, Paul. You're obsessed with yourself. And they made a really simple description for me. And I turned it into a metaphor because my head twisted around to make sense to me. And I think, Deirdre, you heard this the other night, but I'm going to use it. But a real simple way of drawing what self has done as an alcoholic mind is that Bill W. says the root of our problem is that we're obsessed with us, right? I'm totally obsessively concerned about me. And he says that's the root of the problem. So when I had a little idea one time, and I said, all right, well, I'm going to use an idea of a balloon, and I'm going to let the balloon represent self, right? Now, if the root of my problem is I'm obsessed with myself, the root of the problem of the balloon, right, will be represented, that obsession will be represented by air, right? My thinking all the time, into the balloon, it will be represented by air. And my agenda is much more complex than the balloon, which is to be happy. And I have a lot of different gauges, like how much money I have, what kind of woman I'm with, what kind of car I drive, where do I live, all that stuff. And when my mind has an idea that if I get it a certain way, bingo, that means I'm happy, right? It actually doesn't, but that's what it thinks it does. Now, the balloon's agenda is much simpler than mine, and that is it just doesn't want to be popped. It's the only thing it cares about. And its gauge for that success or failure is the thickness or thinness of its skin. Okay? So now the balloon is going to represent me. So the balloon's there, not much air in it, everything's sort of cool. What happens is it starts thinking about itself. So the balloon starts getting blown up. As the balloon gets blown up, the skin of the balloon gets a little thinner, right? And so the balloon realizes, wow, if my skin gets too thin, I'm going to be popped. So self-centered fear arises, right? So what does it do? It thinks more about the situation, how I can maintain it, or control it, or change it, whatever you want to call it. But the thing is, it fills itself up with more air, right? Now the balloon's much bigger, and the skin of the balloon is getting much thinner. And so this fear is actually rising and getting stronger, right? Because it is now threatened. Its agenda is threatened. It feels it's going to be popped. So what does it do? It starts looking around its environment at what can pop it. And it doesn't matter if the thing can pop it or not. It just has to think it can pop it, right? So the balloon looks around the room here, and it sees what it thinks can pop it. And it sees those things as a threat, and it resents that thing. Let's say it's an exposed light. Maybe it's a sharp angle. Maybe someone has a lit cigarette. It feels if I get too close to those things, I'm going to pop. So it starts resenting those things because those things are threatening its agenda, which is to stay a balloon, right? So now it's in a large amount of self-fear, and it's starting to resent a lot of things. So what happens? It tries to control even the situation more. It gets bigger, and the skin's really thin now. Now it's in a huge amount of fear, and everything to it looks like it can pop it. So basically, not just the exposed light, but now it's pissed off at the electric company, you know what I mean? Not the cigarette, but the Winston-Salem. Its resentments are getting larger and more wider, more general. And really, that's the condition we find ourselves in with untreated alcoholism. And I don't mean untreated alcoholism for years, I mean daily, right? The obsession with self blows up that balloon, and it's actually the size of the balloon that dictates the experience of that balloon of fear and resentment. It's not like there's fear and resentment out there. It's actually, the fear and resentment are caused by the balloon itself, by its perception, and then it's projected out there. What happens is the balloon forgets that it's projected it out there, and it starts giving those things all the power they have to affect it, right? So now it's fearful of those things and resents those things, but it doesn't see that it, actually he says it there in the fear inventory, didn't we set the ball rolling? But in a sense, on a perceptual level, we set the ball rolling by where we were perceiving life from. We were perceiving life from a very fearful place, and therefore life seemed very fearful. We were experiencing life from a very threatened place, so therefore we were apt to resent a lot of things, because a lot of things seemed to have the power to thwart our agenda. But it wasn't that the stuff or the power was outside of you. The power was actually inside of you, projected outside, and then forgotten that it was projected, and then seen to be real. But you are the cause of your resentments, and you are the cause of your fears. It's where you find yourself that's causing the fears to appear. It's where you find yourself that causes you to be in resentment. So, because a lot of times it's beautiful because you don't have power over outside things all the time, right? But you can change your position of where you're looking at it from. That you can do. And AA's offered us an alternative. From that egoic point of view, it's very difficult not to live without fear. It's almost impossible. It is impossible in my experience. And also, because of that fearful attitude it's going to have, it's going to be apt to run into a lot of resentments. It's just that way. And then when it pursues what it wants, it's probably because of the mixing in of the fear, the attitude of fear, and then the threatening thing, it's usually it's going to run into trouble trying to get what it wants without hurting other people. It just seems to cause you to be in a collision course with others. So, to me, the solution isn't trying to get rid of fear and resentment, but what's causing the fear and resentment to be seen. It just makes sense to me. Why not change the thing that's perceiving everything as a threat and fearful of everything? Why not change that? It's just more efficient, to tell you the truth, if you look at it. Because if you have 500 things you resent, then you have to deal with 500 things. But if you deal with the thing that caused you to see those 500 things as a threat, you only deal with one thing. And it's almost like that knot theory in a way. There's let's say there's 30 knots in a row, and the 30th knot, let's say, is relationships. Right? So your relationships don't work. So you're experiencing your relationships like they're a knot, they're tight, and you want them to be different, obviously. And then, so maybe you do a lot of workshops, and so you get a little relief. The knot loosens up, and then you tell everyone about the workshops, right? Then 2 weeks later, the knot's back, and you say, "Oh, that workshop sucked," And then you go to another workshop, and maybe it loosens it up a little bit. But sooner or later, usually sooner, life tends to knot it up again, right? And it's really freaking frustrating because you'd like to see it loose, but you're not realizing that knot isn't a knot because of itself. It's linked to all the other knots, right? And the first knot is the dominant knot in a way. The first knot, if you loosen that up, all the other knots will loosen up. If you loosen up any other knot, it doesn't loosen up the first knot. But the first knot loosens up all the others. So if you could find the first knot, right, there, become authentic, tell the truth about what you find, and then if you tell the truth about what you'll find, the next natural response will be a surrender. There's no other conclusion you'll come to. There will be no other conclusion if you honestly tell the truth of where you find yourself. You will surrender. And in that surrender, there's the possibility of those knots loosening occurs. That's been my experience. And then so it almost looked like a byproduct. It looks like, well, how does this affect that? Because your wisdom doesn't see the connection, but there's a connection. You and I are given everything all the meaning it has to us. That's like a spiritual axiom. They use it in the Course in Miracles. It was lesson number 2. And I really love that because I've experienced that be true. That I look at something and I give it a meaning. And that's actually what I experience that thing as. I never really get the thing itself, probably. I bet you almost every relationship I ever had, I probably never actually experienced that person as they were. I experienced my interpretation of that person, what they meant to me. And therefore, that's why they seem to change so much, because my meanings changed. So you start to see that, wow, maybe it's true that I'm giving everything all the meaning it has for me. And if you do an inventory and you see the meaning you've given things and you don't like what that meaning's delivering to you, then I hope that would motivate you to try to switch to a different basis of living. And AA's offer is that if you can rely on something infinite rather than your finite self, it will probably produce a better well-being for yourself. It would almost be like, it's almost like there's the spirit or there's the energy, and that energy or light is like undifferentiated. And then we're all these little cameras or projectors. And so this undifferentiated light comes through our system, right? Our camera, and it goes through our conditioning and programming. And then especially it has to go through our lens, and at the end of the lens is the distortion of ego, let's say. So this undifferentiated light is coming through all of us, goes through our conditioning and programming, and it comes out as our world. I mean singular, my world, right? Now, what's the difference between this light and that light? Just the appearance of it, right? It's still the same light, but you're experiencing it as the distortion now instead of its real essence. Do you know what I mean? So the distortion has an appearance, but basically all of us have that same light coming through us. If you want to call it awareness or whatever, energy, but it's the same thing. It just goes through an apparatus that makes it uniquely different in appearance. Right? But the energy is the same. So I found in my experience at looking at it is that distortion, that lens, is the egoic mind. Right? It's all the beliefs that Paul has, or like it says in the book, unless you let go of all your old ideas, the result's going to be nil. That's a pretty absolute statement. It's not like saying, give up a few old ideas a year and everything will get better. It says unless you give up all your old ideas, the result will be nil. Nil means nothing. So the true result will be nothing. So it's not saying, but each idea given up produces a result. You know what I mean? So you don't do it maybe all at once, but each old idea given up will produce a different result, and it won't be zero. And hopefully that result will motivate you to give up another old idea and another old idea, another old idea. And then what happens is that lens stops being so distorted. And then you get a sense of the impersonalness almost of that light, which makes you very personable. Very personable, because then you have empathy for others, you feel connected, right? Because you have a sense that the light's undifferentiated in a way. You're not so identified with the singularity of it. You get to be identified, not even identified, you sense or feel the unity of it, And to me, I think that's what that happiness, joy, and freedom actually means. Is to, because you won't lose your ego. There's nothing to be afraid of. But what will happen is the distortion it's providing on your life will lessen, and you'll see more of life and hopefully less of you in the way of it. But there'll be a you for sure, So, and to me, that loosening up of the lens or the distortion is unbelievable. It changes everything, because instead of thinking that something outside of you is your source of happiness, which was going to cause you to be an incredible seeker your whole life, you realize that the source of happiness is right where you are. And then you start getting clued into what you need actually not to do for it to actually become more apparent. And to me, I find the solution AA is the transfer point is surrender. That's the only place I have been able to come to, and that's where life brings me all the time. I get to a point where I just have to give up, and it could happen. The process could be 30 seconds, it could be 30 days, it could be 3 hours, it could be 3 years, but no matter what the lengths of process it is, the process is exactly the same. I want it to be different, I want it to be different, I want it to be different. I will not accept this, I will not accept this, I want to accept this, and then suddenly I give up. And then what was a huge problem isn't a problem anymore. And then I get verified that I've given it all the meaning it has. Because the facts haven't changed one bit, but my attitude about them has. So I keep having the same lesson over and over and over and over and over again throughout the day, throughout the month, throughout the year, which is, I see what is, I don't like it, I want it to be different, I try to make it different, it blows up in my face, right? I still try to make it different, blows up in my face, I maybe take a lot of time to blame others, blows up in my face, or I may get very, very fearful that I'm never going to get what I want again, blows up in my face, and finally I just give up. And then the serenity and peace and happiness that I thought that thing was going to bring me, or it had once brought me, I experience without the thing. I experience what I was putting all this emphasis on this person as a source of something, when in fact what they're bringing me at this moment is suffering. Not them, but my identifying them as an object of happiness. If that object of happiness has moved away from me, I am going to suffer, aren't I? It's just the way it's going to be. But if I can realize that all these things that I've given all the meaning to, that this is my happiness, if I don't have this, I'm never going to be okay, ba-da-ba-ba, when all those old ideas are dismissed, what I get to feel is what's been always there, with or without that special someone, with or without the car, with or without the trip, with or without anything. And I'll tell you, man, that's a sobering moment. Because the pursuit of happiness, once you have happiness, becomes like a walk. It's not so driven anymore. Because what you're looking for, you already have. It doesn't stop you from looking. You still enjoy everything, but there's that edge is taken off it now. You know what I mean? Like I have my little fixations that a certain edge happens because I still believe that they're going to save me. Let's say it's a pretty woman. So when I get involved with a pretty woman, I put a lot of meaning on her, a lot of meaning. And if I put a huge amount of meaning on her, when she leaves, the effect is unbelievable to my egoic mind. It's as if I'm never going to be happy again. I'm never going to have love again. And also it means that I'm less than. The rejection proves a belief that I have that I'm actually not worthwhile because my inspiration or what I believe to be all the worthwhileness of the world has just said no to me. So obviously I mustn't be okay. Now that is a fixation of egoic mind. Now usually I found most people have a few of these. And I found that they're coming up now after 14 and a half years. The real beasts are coming up. How much I depended on outside reflections to be not okay and to be okay. And neither of them work. I have to go back and I have to truly rely on a higher power. Not rely on it to get a parking space or to get a new job. I mean, rely on it. Rely on it when your head is screaming that you're no good and you're never going to have what you need again. Rely on it then and know that this is a passing thought and to stay firm in your conviction that you're okay because you are. Now, this isn't going to come by just reading the book. You're going to have to practice, I feel. For you to know that the quality of the higher power is to catch, you're going to have to fall a few times. You have to take some chances. You have to trust. But to me, every time I trust and every time I rely on the higher power, it delivers the goods. Unfortunately, the ante gets raised as the game goes on. What used to be a level of surrender ain't enough now. You got to surrender at a deeper level, maybe even a deeper level. And yet you're always prepared for each level you're brought to by the level that you were on before. So there's never anything that's too much for you because I don't believe my experience of this power in my life has never been that. It's never been that. It's been too much. It's just been my unwillingness to accept. That's all. Anytime I will not accept the way things are, I'm bound to suffer because really life doesn't care about my opinion, to tell you the truth. If the fairy princess is supposed to leave, it leaves. No matter what I think it means to me or what a kind of effect it's going to have, it just leaves, doesn't it? No matter the things some of us wanted the most, they never came, did they? I mean, life is a different game. It's not like us in a way. It doesn't have the same meaning we have. It doesn't really have the same rhythm we think it should have. It just does what it does. And to argue it is useless, isn't it? I was just working with a guy tonight, and so he was talking about being lonely, and then he immediately switched to some spiritual jargon of, well, it's just neediness, da-da-da-da. I said, why don't you give yourself a little moment or two to feel that loneliness or that neediness instead of making a judgment about it? Why don't you feel it and then surrender from there? Don't surrender from your judgment about what you are feeling. Surrender from the feeling itself, Don't dishonor yourself by saying, oh, I shouldn't be lonely. You are lonely. That's what you're feeling, isn't it? You are disappointed. You are devastated. Why don't you give it some honor and let it be okay? And then from there, surrender. Instead of immediately putting on a spiritual trip on it and, oh, well, I shouldn't feel like this, or it's just neediness. No, man. Why would you want to dishonor yourself? Because to me, the true authentic surrender is right from that place, not from the judgment about it, not from the spiritual massage you just gave it, but from the rawness of the feeling, the rawness of where you find yourself. Yeah, I'm disappointed I haven't gotten what I wanted. Let me feel that finally, instead of putting another spin on it. Like the old spin would be drinking a beer. The new spin is like, reading a spiritual book. It's a very unskillful way of dealing with it, to tell you the truth. That's my feeling. You're not getting to the root of the problem. And the real root of the problem, for me, is always gets back to this obsession or fascination with self. We're just consumed by it, I mean, there's so many examples of it. Some guy can tell you something, and you know for sure it wasn't the right thing to do. But if you took a little look at your own life, you're doing the exact same thing with a different spin on it, because it's you doing it, That you and that my. Like if I had your thoughts in my head, I could care less. But because I think they're my thoughts, that's the hook. That's why they're important, because they're about me. I'm obsessed with this me. And the obsession can be on the negative, dramatic side. It doesn't have to always be, I want the best for you. You may love misery. That small self, that little ego of yours may love the drama. And part of loving the drama is bitching about how you'd hate it and how you'd like to be out of it. But you love it. It's like you're milking a cow every day. And then you try to get a lot of people to agree with you. Isn't this milk sour? Yeah. I've always had sour milk my whole life. Yeah. And then everyone votes on it, and now you're right. It doesn't change the misery. It doesn't change it at all. It's just like we tolerate more and more and more and more. When does it stop? When do you finally look at yourself and say, I have to surrender now? I'm so tired of juggling all these things. I'm going to just take my hands away and stop the process. I'm going to give in. I'm going to give up. I mean, you have to have had enough experiences that have brought you to that place inside of you, which is authentic. You had to have as an alcoholic in this life. That's the place to surrender from. Just go to that authentic place and ask for help there. I think anything else is just the true possibility of real change has to come from that place where there's no change at all possible. Don't you think? We've kind of go everywhere else, and it seems like it never works, but we've never gone to that place where, you know what, there's absolutely no chance of this changing at all. None whatsoever. No matter what you do, you're not going to make it better. No matter what you do, you're not going to make it better. I think that's the best place in the world to go, because I tell you the truth, I think it's the most honest appraisal about what's happening here. Just to admit, I want so much what I don't have. That's insane, isn't it? Instead of appreciating what you have. But admit it. Don't try to appreciate what you have with this incredible elephant in the room of not believing that you haven't got what you wanted, To me, putting a little spiritual trip on it is like, yeah, it doesn't work. So fuck it. Yeah, I'm pissed. I haven't got what I wanted. Can I surrender from there? You better believe I can. I can definitely surrender from there because that's real. I can feel it. I can feel it right now. The disappointment. Right then, I believe, in that place where there's no possibility left, that's where all possibility can occur. And I think everything, all the things of moving away from it just prolongs everything that's going on. And you can move away almost from it like infinitely. You can keep going farther away. But all you got to do is one step into it. Only one step. It's a real short journey. You're already feeling it, aren't you? It's already there. I mean, it is what is. Why not just freaking accept it for that second? All right. Oh. Then something can happen. Instead of moving away from it, you can go travel so far. But this is the shortest little journey, just being exactly where you are. Be it joy, be it whatever it is, Some people experience joy, they immediately put a trip on it. Oh, I can't feel joy. Look at all these people suffering around me. It's bullshit, you know what I mean? Constantly taking yourself from what is. Why not just drop in? You want something to really, truly change? It won't change until you embrace it, I don't feel. I just don't feel it will. Because you're still using self-will on it then. You're still like, oh, I'll accept this, but I believe I'm accepting this. I got a feeling if I do, it'll change. And I don't think that's the way it goes. You know? Can you really just sit with something and say, you know, like one of my first sponsors did this to me. This woman had broken up with me, and I was new in recovery, and I had never really felt myself have real feelings for a while. I'd always get loaded when something happened. So I wasn't getting loaded, and I'd had the same feeling like every day for a couple of weeks, and that seemed like an eternity to me. And I said, man, I want to get out of this. I don't like the way I'm feeling, you know? And before, as an addict, I'll do anything. I'll pay any consequence tomorrow to get out of discomfort now, you know? So I'm looking at steps. I'm looking at helping everybody I can see, doing steps. And he said, listen, Paul, after the meeting, I want you to go home. I don't want you to help anybody. I don't want you to go to another meeting. I don't want you to do any more service. I don't want you to buy Agendas. I don't want you to get a movie. I want you to go home, lay in your bed, and ask for what you're super afraid of, and ask for more of it than you can imagine. And I said, why the hell would I want to do that for? I'm trying to get out of this feeling. He says, just trust me. Go home and ask for this thing that you're afraid of. Ask for more of it. So I did. I went home, and I laid down in my bed, and instead of being this contracted, fleeing thing, I just said, boom, hit me with your best shot, you know? And I let my mind go as far as it would on the worst path of all. I mean, imagine the worst possible thing that could happen right now, Paul, and I did times that by 8. Just let it go, let it go. And I laid there for about 2 hours. And after about 2.5 hours, I called him up, and he said, well, Paul, what's happened? He says, I said, I don't feel that great. And he says, well, I asked him, why do you have me do this for anyway? Well, he said, I wanted you to have the experience of this thing that you're afraid of that's going to kill you. I just wanted you to know it can't. And that took so much power from it. Because I was one of the reasons why I would never go to this place is because I thought I'd die there. And in that belief, that's how I really die. Every day, drip at a time, because I'm afraid to go where I think I'm going to die. And that's just been the rub of my whole life. That's what I've experienced. I've experienced almost everything I've done was not to go to that place where I think I'm going to die, and that's where I'm actually reborn, if I can go there. It's that simple. And I'll tell you, man, if I've experienced in this program that there's something that loves me enough. Like an old guy in this program says, I like it a lot. He says, you know, God loves you just the way you are, but he loves you so much he won't let you stay that way. And I believe that to be true. I just believe there's something involved here that if you come into AA, there's something that wants so much for you that it's unwilling to take your feelings into consideration, to tell you the truth. It's unwilling to take your reservations into consideration. It's going to bring about that change. It's going to give you ample invitations, either inside of you or outside of you, but usually a combination of both, for you to grow. It's just going to do it. And it's relentless. It'll just keep offering you the invitation over and over and over again until you take it. You know? To me, that's love. If something knew better than I did and wouldn't take my ignorant reluctance and all that other stuff seriously, I would think that thing loved me a lot. And that's been my true experience in this program. Something that's running the show, because I believe there's a larger will at play here. That larger will has demonstrated it is the larger will, because it doesn't take my small will into consideration one bit, to tell you the truth. It just doesn't. And my real happiness comes when I accept that and align myself with that larger will. And I get to be used. You know? I find I never even asked to do this workshop. My girlfriend of 11 years ago got me into it. It's come so naturally, and it's probably been one of my greatest saving graces in my years of sobriety. I've done about 700 of these or more. And in 700 of these, my batting average is about 1,000. I've always felt the joy. Sometimes it's subdued, but the joy of something moving through me. And I found that's what life really means to me now. It's not the stagnant objects and all this, it's the movement through me of something. That's the real pleasure. Something, you know what I mean? It's like the hose. When the water comes through it, it's defined as itself finally. It's now a hose. Before that, it was just this plastic tube. But the water is what defines its functionality, you know? It's a hose. It has fulfilled its purpose. It has carried water from one place to another. Well, I feel the same way with this program, with this higher power. I never felt like I was what I was until this movement came through me. And I was so unused to it that I had to have it happen a lot to get familiar with it, that this is how I am, actually. I'm not like something that starts here. I'm something that starts here, right? Something that comes in, and this is just like a relay point. I'm not like the bookend, you know? I'm not like the wall and the painting's projected from the wall. I'm like a relay point. Something is moving through me and goes through me, goes through you, goes through this, it's everywhere. And I can find it, I can experience its sense of presence when I allow that movement to have free reign in my life. And I found the best way to do that in AA was to help other people and allow them to help you, you know? To open yourself up to others and let the love come through them to you, and then open yourself up to others and let the love come through you to them. You know, it's the exact same love. It's not like my love and then Katie gives me her love. I don't feel it that way. I feel it's like that undifferentiated light, and you're getting to see its real essence when it's coming through you like that. Instead of thinking this is my love and I'm only going to give it to you, and we're going to have a special relationship, which will probably turn into hate soon, very soon thereafter, right? Instead, I'll let that love just come through, and I'll let your love come through and hit me. You know, it's incredible. So this fear, the idea of fear, to me, the idea of fear is like the sunlight of the spirit is like outside the window, and the obsession with self pulls down a little 25-cent paper shade, and that shade is sufficient to block the sunlight of the spirit coming in. And to me, the surrender of doing the steps and everything that's offered in AA is just your action of letting that shade go. Because it's not just pulled down. When you start realizing, you'll see that you're holding it down. Your obsession with self is holding it down. When you are willing to surrender that, you let it go, the shade goes up and that light comes beaming in. And that's what I experience. And I don't see how you can't figure out how to let the light in without letting go of the shade. And that's the surrender to me. You know what I mean? While holding the shade down, you can have all these incredible takes and philosophies about how the light should be able to come through and maybe put pinpricks in the shade and da-da-da-da-da. But in fact, the real obstruction to the light coming through isn't the shade, it's your determination to keep it pulled down. Because the shade is on those springs. When you let go, it goes up. That's its natural position. You had to make it unnatural by pulling it down. It's your choice in a way, your determination to be separate and to be unique and special and to be right is what's keeping the shade down. When you're willing to surrender that, the shade goes up and the light comes in. It's that simple. And to see that self-will is the cause of fear is one of the ways that woke me up to that point of letting it go. Because I used to mostly think of fear as a cause, right? Fear caused me all this like anxiety, rashes on my body, worry, you know what I mean? Feeling contracted, uneasy near people. But I never realized that it was an effect of something. Because if I I wouldn't deal with the fear before, I would deal with its effects, like the worry and, you know, the rashes and get creams and everything like that. But I didn't see it as an effect. And when I came in AA, how they taught me was that, well, Paul, your obsession with self is what's causing you to be in fear. Like it says it in the book here on page 69, I think, 68. It says, wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? What is that but self-will, right? Self-reliance was good as far as it went, but it didn't go far enough. It just doesn't go far enough. Some of us had great self-confidence, but it didn't fully solve the fear problem. How can self-confidence fully solve the fear problem when the self is the problem. Your identification as self is the problem. An effect of that is fear. The dynamic of you being identified as your little person, right? That dynamic in life causes fear to appear. If you want the fear to diminish, this changes. When this changes, the fear will diminish. It's sort of like the balloon. When the air gets taken out of the balloon, the fear recedes. You have to see that it's your spiritual or lack of spiritual condition that's causing you to live in this climate of fear. And the lack of spiritual condition is based on your obsession with self. You cannot be in good spiritual condition obsessed with self, because that's the problem. And the obsession with self will tell you you have all these other problems, right? But it's the problem naming another problem. They're all the same thing. And the place to deal with the problem maker is where it is, right in here. And to me, so fear is like a climate. That's how I felt it. It's like that fish in the water. It's your medium when this dynamic is set in your life, which is you're relying on yourself. That egoic mind thinks it's the end-all and be-all. Even if it thinks it's the worst end-all and be-all, it's still obsessed with itself, right? When that's in place and you're living your life from that point of view, the climate you're going to be living life in is fear. Either a lot of it or a little of it. You may have an edge all the time or big upsets, but the fact is fear will be the medium in which you're living in. Because you cannot possibly escape it for one reason, because of time. Your egoic mind is based on time. And it has this incredible harvesting field of fear and future fear in the future. Right? You may be totally fine right now, but all you have to do is have a thought about some terrible thing happening to you in a month, and your body will contract right now, you will feel uneasy, and you won't be present. Right? That's what happens, and that's what thoughts do. And what the thoughts are about? There are thoughts about time, about a future, something that you have no idea what it's going to be like, but you have your little bias forecaster, and it tells you it's going to be terrible, or it's going to be bad. Right? It gives you a bad spin on it. So while you're listening to that weather channel, you're going to start feeling uncomfortable. And then you're going to feel like this natural tendency to go to your wardrobe and get a raincoat. You know what I mean? And put it on. Because you're going to start thinking bad weather's going to happen. And it may be sunny as hell. You should be out there getting a tan, but you're sitting there listening to your weather channel and you got a raincoat on and you're expecting a hurricane to hit you. That's obsession with self. And that's one way it defeats you. It uses the idea of time, creates this future that you don't know how it's going to be, yet it tells you how it's going to be. It gives you a forecast. It gives you a bias view, right? A real bias view. And then you're letting it dictate your experience now. You're like this. Like, you ever know, to me, it hits me in the morning the worst. Every time I wake up, my head is like in a bunker. It's like so afraid of what's going to happen. It's like unbelievably flipped out. I mean, I just woke up. If I don't say hello to my recovery quickly, I'm in a lot of trouble that day. Because my head, it's like it gets a bunker mentality. Then I'm walking around, I'm not open to any love coming at me because I don't think love's going to come at me. I think some shit's going to come at me from everybody. So if you are a bearer of love, I won't recognize you as such. I'll see you as a bearer of bad tidings. You have to see that's the meaning. You're giving everything all the meaning it has. And it's going to be either based on your egoic point of view or a point of view based on a reliance on something greater than yourself. Those are the two alternatives. And they're going to make your world for you. And so in the world of ego, thinking that there's going to be bad tidings, you can have like 50 opportunities a day of someone that wants to bring you intimacy and love, and you'll say no to every one of them because you will not recognize it. Because that's not the meaning you've given it. You've given it another meaning, which, oh, this person's a drag. I don't like this person. They don't fit my picture. Screw them. They can't do anything for me. Whatever, you know what I mean? But we shut down, separate. But then, from another point of view, you may be open to the possibility of what the day can bring, and then you'll be in wonder. It's the same freaking day. The same day, the exact same thing could happen, and yet your take on it can be totally night and day. Why is that? And if you realize that, like if you want a view of the mind, simple statement, if you're having a good day, I bet you very soon you'll start thinking something bad's going to happen. Or this cannot possibly last, or they're going to find out I'm a fraud, or somehow, you're right? But if you're having a bad day, the same mind's going to tell you it's going to last forever. It will. I feel shitty. Whoop! I'm going to feel shitty for the whole month. This is never going to change. Da, da, da. But if I'm feeling good, when's the next shoe going to drop? You know what I mean? It's incredible. That's the bias of self. That's what, man, become aware of that. See, we're looking way far down the road, thinking that's where all the problems lie. The problems is in our perceptions. And our perceptions are dictated by where we're looking at things from. And that dictation is obvious. Either you're surrendered and you're relying on something greater than yourself, or you're not. And the gauge is unbreakable. It will tell you where you're at every second of the day. Every second of the day, you will know if you become aware of that gauge. You will know where you're at. And if you don't know, it will tell you pretty quickly thereafter, because you'll start feeling really shitty really fast. So it's a beautiful thing. All day, something's trying to indicate to you where you're at, right? Why not just take the indication? At that moment, stopping and surrendering to me is the key. Then do the steps, then do all the work, but take the attitude of surrender. Because it says here, self-reliance has failed us. Even in spiritual concerns, relying on yourself has failed you. You know how many people have meditated for like 20, 30 years? I was at this thing, I'll tell you this little story because I thought it was great. I walked into a meeting, and this guy, if he hears this tape, will get mad at me, but walked in a meeting, and this guy's a big Buddhist guy. He's got about 30 years of Buddhism, I think, under his belt. Pretty big guy. And so he sees me come in and he wants to talk to me for a minute. So we start talking about emptiness, these great Buddhist concepts, and, my spiritual pride's rising, his spiritual pride's in place, We're having this little discussion. Then suddenly my ex-girlfriend comes in, who I had this breakup with. The discussion goes right out the window. My energy goes like this up my spine, comes into my head, flips, and my head gets super hot, right? For like 5 minutes. I'm sitting there, I go, I can't discuss this any longer. Right? So I'm sitting there. And so life says, just put a break on this little spiritual discussion. Then I go outside after the meeting, and he starts telling me his situation he's been in, which he's been totally powerless over, and these 30 years of meditation hasn't done one freaking thing to change it. After that, why not just get surrender's it? There's nothing I can do that's going to make it safe for me. I can't transcend it. I can't get around it. Like that song, I can't get over it. I can't get under it. But you can surrender. That's what you can do. Doesn't mean you don't meditate, you don't study Buddhism. That's what everyone thinks. Oh, surrender means Buddhism doesn't work. No. Buddhism, I think, is awesome. AA is awesome. But without the quality of a surrender, I think it's limited. I really do. I think it's still it's like changing a state of mind. That state of mind can always change back if the right stimuli comes. But if you go into a state of being, it's different. It's much different. State of being is not a state of mind. There's a huge difference there. The state of being is what allows any state of mind to come up. A state of mind is one at a time. And usually what happens is when the mind realizes it's in a state and it likes it, it tries to keep it that way. It tries to defend it. It tries to do more of it. It tries to make it more secure. And you know what? It never lasts. It never lasts. You can't keep it you can't keep that state of mind in that state of mind. It will always change. But the state of being never changes. It's like what allows everything else to come and go, because for everything to change, there has to be something constant in a sense. Do you know what I mean? The backdrop of everything that's constantly changing has to be constant to hold all the change. Do you know what I mean? There's got to be something constant. You are that thing that's constant, as you are the thing that changes. You can identify as one or the other, or have a human experience with a spiritual reality. I think that's a better idea. I really do. And the possibility is there. By reliance on a higher power and surrender, I think you can allow that transfer to occur if it's supposed to occur. I don't think you can think your way into it. I don't think you can do your way into it. But I do believe you can surrender. And that will entail thinking and doing, and none of that gets excluded. But a surrender is a different thing. It's a stopping. You know? You stop trying to figure it out. You stop trying to defend it. You stop trying to make it better. You stop trying to make it worse. You stop trying to make what's intolerable tolerable. You start trying to make what's unbearable bearable. You just tell the truth. And in that surrender, I feel, is the possibility of real change. I haven't found it anywhere else. I haven't. I did meditation for 12 years. I took retreats all over Asia. I did all this stuff and all that stuff, and when push comes to shove, it doesn't mean a damn thing. But I've experienced surrender, and that means a huge thing. A huge thing. Now, it doesn't mean meditation isn't valuable. It is, because it brings you to a point where you realize that it isn't valuable, in a sense. You know what I mean? I mean, the greatest, some guys have meditated 20 years, and when they woke up, they realized it was useless, and yet they had to do it. There's the beautiful realization. It actually was useless, but you had to do it to get to that point. The real point of awakening is the uselessness of it all, in a sense. You know? That's where you give up. Wow. Aren't you the struggle? Aren't you? Aren't you identified as the struggle from what you want or what you don't want? Moving away from one, moving towards the other? And it seems like a struggle, doesn't it? Sometimes you move away from what you don't want and it follows you, right? Sometimes you start moving towards what you want and it moves away. I would call that a struggle, wouldn't you? You try to get rid of what you don't want, you try to bring more of what you want in. You're struggling with life in a way, trying to make it behave or perform the way you want it to. You don't realize that maybe the better way is for you to perform and behave the way it wants you to. And how are you going to know that until you get in touch with your spirituality? Until you get to a point where instead of wanting to be Paul's cause, you want to be the effect of something else, of God, let's say, or of the higher power. You want to be its effect. Like it says in our prayers, it says we're going to turn our will and our life over to the care of a higher power. My old head would be, well, I'm going to, it says take away my difficulties. My old think would be, take away my difficulties so I can get that beach house in Malibu. But that's not the deal. It says, take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help. What? That's not my plan. Of course it isn't, Paul. But then you surrender, because this is the larger plan. Relieve me of the bondage of self. So that I feel better? No. That I may better do thy will. Well, that's not really, I want to be removed of the self so I can feel happier. No, it says here, relieve me of the bondage of self that I may better do thy will. So I can be used more. Isn't the day when I'm used by you stop so I get the real fruit of it? So I can really enjoy the candy? Or is it like the real candy is to be used by you? That's the real goal, is to be used by you. Not to be used by you to bring me to my real goal, which is now I'm happy, free, and enlightened. I don't need anything. But actually the real goal is to be used by this higher power. What an incredible novel idea, right? The real goal for me is to do exactly what I'm doing right now. And the real goal for me would be putting away the chairs. That would be exactly what I'm doing right now, right? I'm being used. It's the last place I would have looked for what I really wanted. I thought what I really wanted was to use you, especially when I was an addict, an alcoholic. That's how I looked at everything. How can I use you to get what I want? But no, this larger thing is saying the same thing to me in a way. It's going, Paul, I'm going to use you so that you can get what you want. And my head just goes, it doesn't work. But when you practice it, it works. When I forget about myself, I find something greater than that. If I'm totally consumed about myself, it sucks, doesn't it? I don't even care how great a day it is. If you're in your head, that day becomes small. It just does. I mean, how many examples do we need? So if you are in a lot of fear, you can diagnose yourself perfectly. If your fear is persisting, you're in self. You really are. You're somehow or another, you're not accepting the way things are. You don't want to be used. You don't want to be the hose. You want to be the pond where the water resides, right? And you know what? That's the suffering, because something larger than you has something in store for you, and you're not willing to accept it. You don't think the big thrill of your night is saying hello to that newcomer. You think the big thrill of your night is having that good-looking guy or girl say hello to you. Well, maybe in God's will, the big thrill is you saying hello to the newcomer. Maybe both. I'm not saying one's better than the other, but you know what I mean? You may be missing the whole big point. Like, I'm always bitching about what I don't have, but look at the opportunity I do have. I work with like 60 people a week for a long time. I've worked with thousands of people I don't even know in AA. Thousands. It's unbelievable. What a gift. You know what I mean? And yet I'll go home and bitch about not having that one special person in my life. That to me is very small. It's a small thing to be doing with such a large present in front of me. So, you know what? When I was a kid, no matter what I was brought for Christmas, I was mad at. It wasn't what I wanted, right? I was always disappointed. Whenever the Coke dealer brought out how much Coke he had, I'd always be disappointed, even if it was like pound, because I knew it wasn't enough. I was not, have a great spiritual experience. It didn't matter. In 5 minutes, I wanted more. It's just the bias of my alcoholic mind. I won't look at what I have. I'll look at what I don't have. And what's telling me what I don't have and what I have is my head. And it has an intention for me. It wants to defeat me. It wants to make me small. It just does. So, I think that's it for tonight. Any questions? I know I didn't go over the inventory, but I think I went over the...
I wanted to ask you a quick question.
Yeah.
And I'm listening to you for a little while now, and is it still okay to want the beach house and the relationship?
Most definitely.
And that's,
You'll want them even more. I found a lot of people's fear in AA is to have their wants. They've got this distorted idea of what selflessness is. It's not selflessness. That's not at all. I mean, this guy was talking to me tonight about being so needy. And I said, well, go out, ask some woman to go out. Well, I can't do that because they probably won't want to marry me and I want to have kids. I said, wait, you're way ahead of your time. You're just so lonely, and I'm not talking about being married. You're lonely. Ask a girl out. Have some fun Friday nights. Nothing wrong with it. But, I mean, I can't, if they're not the one I'm looking for, then I think it's a waste of time. I said, that's how your mind's defeating you. It creates this huge sense of lack, and then it won't let you have anything to fill it. I mean, come on. That's not spirituality. That's like sadism, masochism. You're hurting yourself. We'll get the money in a minute. So, you know what I mean? No, I have more wants and dreams, but I'm also, unfortunately, I found that some of the wants I haven't gotten. And just, it's been a humbling experience, because for me as an addict, I never really let myself want too many things. The only thing I've ever really let myself want was drugs, to tell you the truth, cocaine. And since I've been sober, I've let myself really want something, and I didn't get it. And it's been excruciatingly painful. And it was the first time I've actually taken a chance to do it, because it was easy to want an inanimate object like a drug, and I got beat like hell by that cocaine. But somehow there was a safety there, because I chose it and I could do it, I don't know, it was weird, but I never wanted to take a chance of wanting something outside of me as much as I have this last year, and it didn't work out, and it really hurt my feelings hugely. And but it's been a great experience for me, because it humbled me out, and I realized that what I was looking out there in them, I have to find it in myself, or I'll never be able to give it to them anyway. If I think they're my source, then I'm going to worship them, but I'm going to keep them in my temple. I'm going to make sure that they don't go anywhere, and that's not love. So, no, it was funny, I'm just starting to learn what I really want now after 14 and a half years, and I'm willing to have it. Before I used to put a spiritual trip on it. Well, I'm not supposed to want anything, but that was a lie. I want a lot of things, but it's all right if I don't have them now. But I'm not going to deny I don't want them. No way. Yeah. But God will sort of sort it out for you, I think. I mean, if you keep knocking on the door and no one answers, and you keep knocking, maybe you should move on. Yes, Tom?
What if you want things and you work very hard, you get them, but every time you get one of them, you do your best to, it's like you don't deserve it, so you go out and
That's right.
do your very best to just screw it up because it's sort of like,
Yeah, well, it means that it goes against a deep meaning you have about yourself. The deep meaning is you don't deserve anything, and then life's being nice to you. So one of them's got to go, right? And usually you're not willing to give up your old ideas, so the outside gets blown up. That's like the thing about the results will be nil unless you let go of all your old ideas. Well, that's a big old idea, So when something comes your way, you don't deserve it, you blow it up to be right. Are you willing to give that up now? Are you?
well, if I'm not, I'm in big trouble.
Well,
The
you
thing
may
I
not
have
be
trouble
ready.
with, though, is, still on a daily basis with, maybe I'm unrealistic. I have a number of things to do, and I find myself being very angry at myself at the end of the day if I don't accomplish them all,
So yeah,
But yeah, I'm working on trying to surrender and just kind of saying, it'll be all right, just do the best you can and do as much as you can do today, but
well, that judgment's also based on an old idea. You set the bar really high, and then you fail, and then you can beat yourself up. It's real obsession with self. That's the old idea. It's like you're the one who made the list, right, of things to do, and then you're the one who judges yourself bad, not fulfilling them, but you made the list. So, I mean, you're like the guy who can only jump 6 feet, and you're also the guy who puts the bar up, and you do the little cruel snicker, 6'5", so that the guy's always going to fail. And then you can point out to him that you failed. But that's all you. It's you doing the whole thing.
and then I love to wallow in the failure.
Yeah, there you go. There's a good question to ask. Why is that? Because you get to be right there, and it's safe. It's safe. Misery is safety for a lot of people. You know what I mean? Safety. It's safe to be miserable. It's not like it's... The program, surrender gives you balls, you know what I mean? You may take some whacks, but you're going to be out there, swinging away at times. Because you'll have balls. You won't play this game of, I want, but I can't, I do, but no. If you want it, you go for it. You don't get it, I don't get it. Okay, I accept that and move on. But I don't. This thing of like, you're on the pot. You won't take a shit, and you keep telling yourself, "But I need to, but I can't. I shouldn't." Come on, just dump and go. You know what I mean? Participate in life. You know what I mean? Why not? What are you protecting? This small thing that's killing you. That's what you're protecting. You're living your whole life in protection of an idea that's not bringing you any joy. What an incredibly bad investment. It really is. I mean, look at what the protection you have given. You have provided so much protection for yourself, but you've been protecting the wrong thing the whole time. It's like that thing with the, you don't mind if we go 5 minutes later? All right. It's that thing about the egoic point of view. It's wild. You think you're in this fortress, right? And you have your ego with you, your little talker up in your head. And so you feel like you're protected in this fortress. What happens is maybe you have an experience, or you have a wake up, or you have a free sample, and suddenly your whole perspective changes, and you realize the fortress you thought you were in was actually a prison. And then you see how incredible this prison system was, because you don't think you're in a prison. It doesn't need any guards or any fences or nothing. You actually think it's a safe place, so you don't want to leave. So you stay in your misery. So life knocks on your door and says, Paul, you don't have to be miserable, but you actually defend it. You think it's your fortress. Life is asking you to come out of the prison, and you're saying, no, you're not getting me out there. I know what's going to happen out there. I know what happens here, and this is okay. But I really know what's going to happen if I leave here. That's insanity. You've mistaken a prison for a fortress. And the thing that you think is your great counselor and friend is the jailer. And so when you have this desire to be free, and you talk, who do you bring it to? The jailer. The jailer's function is to keep you in prison. It has no intention of bringing you freedom. So it makes a big plan. All right, 12 o'clock Friday night, you're breaking out, Paul. So it gives you your little plan. And as soon as you go out, it calls it whistles, calls, and the sirens come out, and it calls you on it catches you. And then you're brought back to it, and then you're in your prison again. But most of the time, you think it's your fortress. Wake up. It's not. What you're valuing and protecting is what's killing you. You're living your life to protect what's killing you. I think I'll end on that one. All right, so we'll pass the basket and